Hello, hello.
All right. Okay, Zach, Dane?
Hello, Darren. How are you?
I am blessed.
Good.
Hello, Mr. Harper. Hello, Dane.
Hello, Mike.
Dr. Cowan.
Okay, people are slowly making their way in from the waiting room.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Everybody's coming in. Is there any nice music out there for you all in that waiting room?
I didn't hear any.
That's just as well though, Dane.
No magazines to read out there or anything?
Nope.
All right, Mike, it's 3:31 and I think we have a quorum if people can announce themselves who's here.
Okay, if you would,
Jefferson.
welcome, Tyrone.
Bless you. Thank you.
Holly Callier,
Welcome, welcome.
Elizabeth Calderon,
Elizabeth, welcome,
Torrin Sanders.
welcome.
Do we have Ms. Brooks?
Don't see her name or her face yet.
And do we have, I don't see, wait, we got more people in the waiting room. Here we come. Ah, I see, Wanda has joined. So it looks like all the board members are here except for Monique. Is that correct? Or Monique, am I missing you somewhere?
I think that's correct.
So Mike, we have a quorum if you'd like to call the meeting to order.
So according, being present, let me call the meeting of the Ethics Review Board for October 26th, 2020 to order. The first item on our agenda is to ratify the certification of necessity for video conference, obviously under the circumstances. So I just need a motion to that effect.
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Approval of minutes from the previous board meeting. Are there additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second.
And those in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Now we'll move to the monthly report from the Inspector General, Mr. Harper.
And Mike, I did not receive a monthly report to include.
Yeah, I was going to mention that first. First of all, thank you. I hope everyone is doing well this afternoon. Because we had the meeting in October, we'll be submitting a monthly report that updates anything else that occurred in September. We spent a considerable amount of time for the members of the board who participated in the last meeting with briefings from the other first assistants for our 3 divisions, including legal affairs. So there are no changes to be noted since the October 1st meeting. And for the sake of brevity, since we certainly appreciate having the amount of time that Dr. Cowan, you and the other members gave us last week, there are no major changes except I want to make sure that everyone knows we are on schedule to release the 3rd audit. This is the payroll audit of the Audubon Institute and Commission, on schedule for the new members of the board. Pursuant to the IG Act and the Ethics Review Board Act, you will receive this report prior to its public release. If you don't receive it, then please call me immediately. We will be in touch with the newer members just to make sure that we had the correct email address, or in some instances, rare as they may be, the files may be larger than what your email may allow you to receive, or it'll go directly to spam or junk mail. So I do want to make sure that that is the one item that I mentioned that has changed since October 1st. Otherwise, we have been extremely busy. I know I personally have. And again, to the members of the board, I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve the people of New Orleans for these last two and a half plus years. I'll take any questions that you may have about what I just said or anything else related to the office.
Any questions for the IG or comments? Nothing. Thank you for your service, Mr. Harper, and we wish you the best.
Thank you again.
The independent police monitor. Is Miss Hudson on with us? There she is.
Yeah, good afternoon. Sorry, I had a minute trying to get in the, unmute and video on. My computer I'm not able to get my computer to function right now. And so I'm not able to get to my report. But you have the numbers in front of you. It's shaping up to be another busy year. We are dealing with our community, working on churning out reports. We'll have lawsuits and claims for damages coming out here in the next month or so. We'll also have information about a mini audit we did on whether or not officers are wearing PPE. That'll be coming out in the next month or so. And we're working with NOPD right now on an audit plan, comparing what their internal oversight works on, from the Public Integrity Bureau to the Professional Standards and Accountability Bureau, in an effort to get them to the finish line on the consent decree, and then also to keep them in compliance going forward. So we're all trying to get on the same page as to what each entity will do, which type of audits, reviews, etc. And we've been having good conversations about that. And since I don't have the report in front of me, I can't touch on any highlights, but if you have any questions for me about that, I'll try to answer them as best I can without having the report in front of me.
Ms. Hudson, I have a question on a different matter. I got a call from a citizen who said that the IPM is in some way publicly endorsing or showing themselves as a member or an ally of a campaign that has to do with the district attorney's election, and he was a little unclear, and I just wish you would explain it to us, please.
Yeah, there's this coalition called the People's DA, and they do not endorse candidates or parties or anything of that political nature. It is a coalition with a progressive agenda, and my part in it and our part in it is to talk about how district attorneys should conduct oversight of police as well. So they're part of the checks and balances in the system. So we provide information about that as a part of that coalition, but it does not endorse any candidates or parties or anything like that. It just puts information out there.
Okay.
about the
So
upcoming
they're not affiliated with or supportive of any particular candidate.
No, absolutely not. It's just about issues, and it encompasses I'd say about 40 or 50 groups in the community groups and people. So it's just a broad swath of the community came together and looked at their concerns. So you had people on, whether it was victims of crimes or survivors, or, people on the defense side, or, whomever they represented, just many people coming together and saying the DA can do more. And our part in it was about how they can conduct oversight and be a part of oversight of the NOPD.
So that the person who called me, that may just be a sample of one person, but let's say there's a possibility that it's not, that citizens might be getting the impression that the IPM is aligning with a particular candidate for district attorney. We always say it's not just the reality, it's the perception of things. And I wonder, could you have played the role that you played without signing on as a member of the coalition?
Well, obviously, yeah, most definitely could have done that. But I think in this time, in this moment, where we're trying to fix the things that are wrong in our system of justice, we all have to play our role. And so obviously with this pulpit, I have an opportunity to play a bigger role and to really educate the community about how district attorneys can be a big part of this problem and or the solution. So yeah, obviously I could have done it, but I really do feel like in this moment, it's important for all of us to just be involved.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
Could
Mr.
you
Chair,
tell
I'd
me
like
the
to
name
add
of that
on
organization? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Could you say the name of that organization was called the People's DA, if I heard it right?
That's right.
Thank you.
Dr. Sanders.
Yes. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the organization. Retired Judge Calvin Johnson is a major figure in it, and I participated in some activities with them myself, with a group that I'm in called Together New Orleans. And definitely it's nonpartisan. It's in the spirit of good government and also change. And so I definitely think we should support independent monitors' involvement in that. People will perceive a lot of different things, but I think there's no reasonable person would really assume that there's any attempt to align oneself with a particular candidate. It's just a statement of kind of best practices that I think is increasingly supported by a wide range of people in terms of what a DA can and should be doing these days. Thanks.
Thank you. Understand.
Thank you,
Anything
Dr.
else
Sanders.
for Ms. Hudson? Or
Yes,
Ms. Hudson, do you have anything else?
I'm
Yes,
sorry,
is there-
Dr. Khan, for interrupting. I just wanted to say that, this is sweeping the country, and New Orleans is jumping into them. So it's an important moment for New Orleans here. And so that was the only follow-up, Dr. Khan. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
So the name of it is the People's DA or the People's Campaign? Is that different?
The People's DA Coalition, and I think it's
Okay.
I should know the exact website, but it's like the People's DA, peoplesdacoalition.org.
Okay.
Something of that nature.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, then anything else for the monitor? Unless there she is. Susan, one more question. I have heard you say for a long time that when the consent decree is finished, the independent police monitor would be the obvious choice for the place to continue, audits and oversight of NOPD. You're shaking your head, so I imagine that means that you still think that.
Absolutely.
Could you just give us a little? I'm just trying to follow your evolving thinking on how that might work.
Yeah, and this is taking me back to when I was at LAPD. So it's an exciting moment for me right now, as we weren't really an integral part of it. And now we have that chance to be that part and to really bring in the community side of it. So we're very excited about that. But it's a lot of nuts and bolts. It's audits, it's reviews, it's what we do for each case is like a mini audit anyways. And all of those that mini audits include constitutional principles. So I brought that with me from LAPD from a different consent decree. And it's just as applicable here. And what we found out is when we compared what we were doing on
I think you're frozen there, Susan. I feel like the anchor when the tape doesn't work. Okay. Ms. Hudson, are you there? No. Okay. Let's just to give her another minute or two, but while we're waiting, just for the benefit of board members who maybe haven't followed this whole consent decree process, it's almost 10 years old now. Basically the NOPD is under the direction of a federal judge, and the judge is taking her lead from the consent decree monitor, which the city pays for every year. And that process is going to stop at some time. The mayor would like it to stop yesterday, and there are other people who are feeling that there's still important work to be done. Is she gone? Yeah, okay. Anyway, so I don't want to belabor that, but I just thought in case new board members had any questions about the context, that might be useful. The proposal is that the IPM would take up essentially the work of the federal monitor once the consent decree is brought to a close. Okay, shall we move to, is she back? No.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we move to, oh, there she is. There you are.
my apologies. My apologies. I just when you think you've got Zoom down and the technology down, of course it throws you a curve.
I feel you.
So I apologize, but so we're critiquing them in the same manner, and I'm working with NOPD to make sure that we can cover as many areas of the police department as possible. They have an internal audit unit, they have PIB, and there's us, and if we all work together, we can look over what they do and we can conduct some audits on our own, but that way we'll be able to cover more. So I'm excited about this period.
Great. Well, I'll keep asking you about that along the way because it seems really important. I agree with you on that.
Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you.
What is the expected date or timeline for the resolution?
Completion of the consent decree?
Yes.
I hear from a year to 3 years.
Yeah, so they have to comply at a very high level, 95% or so with all of the paragraphs. And I think they have a few that they haven't complied with yet, but they're close, very close. And they have to comply with those for 2 years. So unless the judge says otherwise.
Does that, Ms. Hudson, does that 1 to 3 year kind of window sound about right to you?
Yeah, depending on how the judge is feeling about it, because I don't think they've complied with everything yet. And generally they're supposed to comply with everything before they get that time period where they're really saying stay in compliance. But the judge has the power to do, if she thinks they're doing well, she has the power to let them out when the time comes.
And if I could, let me just give one more comment for further context here. One of the things that the federal monitor is not prepared to sign off on right now is how supervision works within OPD. So in other words, these are not little trivial extracurricular items. Imagine in something like a police department, how critical proper supervision is to the functioning of the whole thing. So it's being held up on a pretty big point, I think. Ms. Hudson, would you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got supervision, which is huge, and it cuts throughout everything. So it's a matter of accountability, it's a matter of performance, all of those issues, constitutionality, all of that matters. So it's huge. And we've seen a couple of problems here and there. So we've, got to look into that. And so NOPD just has to do better at that. And so that's a huge issue. Stop searches and arrests. So the constitutionality of how they encounter and stop people is another big issue. So these are not little bitty issues, as you've mentioned, Dr. Karen. These are huge. So very important to get them right.
And just
I do have a related question.
go ahead, please.
I may, so looking ahead and, 1 to 3 years, or 3 years-ish sounds distant, but these things sort of catch up quickly. Are there steps that your office is taking or needs to take or wants to take in order to be able to fill the shoes that will be left behind when the federal consent decree ends?
Yeah, great question. We're going to do the best we can. We don't have the same amount of resources that they have. They have 2 times the number of resources that we have. I think they're 2 million a year. We were at 1.1 before the coronavirus hit. So we're going to be more around 1 million. So half of their resources. So that's going to be difficult. We're going to be on furloughs for the next year, I think the mayor's saying. So we're going to lose some days here and there. And that's why we're trying to work with NOPD to the Professional Standards and Accountability, which is the Compliance Bureau, and then also the Public Integrity Bureau, to see how can we stretch this further. Because without, those extra resources, I'm not going to be able to cover everything that the consent decree monitors did cover. So we're going to be real smart, and we are going to prioritize in our office our meat and potatoes, which are complaints and use of force. And a yearly audit of those is something that will be right on point. It will tell us a lot about what's right and what's wrong with the department. And those will go a long way. And we can look at supervision as a part of those. We can look at stop searches and arrests. So what we'll do is try and weave these into our audits to get as much as we can out of each one, because we won't be able to do as many as they do.
Thank you. Thanks, Ms. Hudson.
Thank you.
Can we move to the report from our trainers, please?
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Let me just go through this little technical piece. Yeah.
Wait, now, Tony, I've got on the agenda your 5-year overview after your monthly report.
Well, the where we are and what we've done, that's embedded in this report.
Ah, okay.
It all flows right through. It's going to be a quick report. We won't take up too much time. We know everybody's zoomed out. And
so Mike, this is going to be both items 5.
items together.
Understand. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Start from the beginning. So what we wanted to do is just provide a very quick overview of kind of the 5-year progress, that overview of this ethics education contract that we've had and the work that we've done, and especially because we had a number of new members. So just wanted to do a little bit of a retrospective, and here it is, and we're going to run through it fairly quickly. And we're just going to do a quick background, timeline, overview, some of the recommendations, and what we see looking ahead, kind of this COVID year, and just a summary of the accomplishments. In year 1, so in 2015, through the RFP process, we were hired, and just to kind of focus on providing ethics education as provided by the Ethics Review Board and the city charter. So we initially developed this ethics training curriculum for city departments and agencies. And in those early meetings, we tried to think about some departments or agencies we would focus on. So we focused on 4 or 5 agencies, including the city council, safety and permit, sewage and water board, and began that training then. From the very beginning, our focus was training based on the Louisiana Code of Ethics, and we knew that we would use that as the basis. And we didn't realize that there was a designation until we delved into this, that the state offered as a certified ethics trainer. And so toward the end of the year, I became certified. And in that very first year, all of the trainings that we did actually as a result of the cooperation of and the foresight of this board, along with the former administration, we were able to do those early trainings without offering any certification whatsoever. There was just a desire for this kind of training to begin. So the next year, as I said, I maintained that certification and was really privileged to add Eric Caulfield Consulting Group to the training, as to the training roster. And at that point, we expanded the list of departments that received training and started to refine our training, because at this point, we were starting to get feedback from some of the people that we trained, some of the departments, and we started to understand really what was needed. So I think in year 3, that was kind of a pivotal year. We decided to start looking at the boards and commissions and creating some customized training there, because we realized that those were, and especially new board members, and that because we had so many boards and commissions in New Orleans, that those board members were subject to the same Louisiana code, but probably had no training on the code. And so we began working with them. And again, at that point, year 3, I think that was also the new administration, and they were equally as cooperative as the previous administration, and very supportive of our efforts. And we were able to work with the mayor's office to really sign up a lot of boards and commissions to begin our training there. Another thing about year 3 is something that hadn't been done, and I think has really laid the groundwork for what I think is going to be a strong foundation for the future around education, is the board, you all sent a letter to all the departments and agencies reminding them about the requirement of designating a liaison, ethics liaison. Many of the departments did not know about that, did not really know what that role was, but as a result of that letter, over 25, almost, I think 31 departments, agencies designated that liaison. And so that provided a real strong foundation, I think, taking ethics education into the future. And also that year, you all commissioned us to do sort of a deep dive project around ethics culture. And some of the things, just to remind you all, the methodology that we used, it was very liaison focused. We conducted several 90-minute focus groups. We talked to a number of departments. We did a lot of best practice research. And we also had, at this point, over 340 survey. We had data at that point. So we could use that data along with the best practice research, along with the focus groups, to kind of come up with really a more specific sort of set of strategies to really drive that ethics culture that I think that this whole initiative was really aiming for. And it just some of the recommendations from that, you'll see that we've picked up some of the recommendations from that study. Included we needed to provide recognition of ethics excellence, so a special recognition for those individuals or agencies that had demonstrated a commitment to ethical behavior, that there was a need for more targeted training or leadership training, that there was a need for standardized training of new employees, sort of something during orientation, that there was a need for innovative, or that these are things that work, innovative kind of ethics education materials that might include non-training materials, some cards, some posters, some reminders, some cheat sheets, those kinds of things. And one of the things that was sussed out from all of that is that there was a need for skill building on important aspects of the code. And really the training that our regular training, we picked up on a lot of these. And for instance, our regular training now includes role playing, because we understood that a lot of people needed a little practice on how to face sort of ethical dilemmas. And then we also understood that the liaisons really wanted to meet periodically to build their skills as liaisons. There was a special thing, this is something just down the line. We saw that this was a best practice, something that we could introduce or could be introduced into New Orleans. But to introduce a tool to evaluate and improve behavior in departments with low compliance. We thought that if this board or if the training, we could be a resource to those departments that were having some difficulty with ethics training, having difficulty conveying their goals or the culture that they wanted to have. So ethics audit is one of the things, and that there needed to be very much an education and awareness campaign around whistleblowing. We understood then that whistleblowing, through our studies, that whistleblowing protections are really critical to be able to have a really, to develop that very strong ethics culture at the city. In year 4, final year 4, we began implementing some of those training related recommendations that I just mentioned. And the biggest thing in year 4 is we began sort of the establishment of the ERB Torch and Liaison Award and that awards. And that was really spearheaded so much by the former chair, Dr. Ricks. This was something that he was very, very interested in. And Dr. Cowan and this sort of launched this. So the ERB Ethics Award was one of the initiatives that we found actually during the deep dive study that was important, and just creating a positive reward system. So we started the Liaison Award as well as the Torch Award. And those were the two. We ended up having an awards luncheon at the end of 2019, and along with the speaker, and we invited all the liaisons, and we were hoping to be able to build on that very first initial project. And year 5 and beyond, I think Eric is going to kind of take over this last couple of slides, next few slides.
Thank you, Tony. Good afternoon, everyone. As you can imagine, our last year or so has been a very dynamic one. As Tony had alluded to earlier, a lot of the great information that we learned through the deep dive study, we actually have been implementing a lot of it. We've been meeting with the liaisons. As Tony talked about, we have the awards, which have been started. We've refined our in-person training to reflect, and also something that we had heard from you all, which also came in the report, was really a focus on leadership. And so around this time last year, or rather in the fall of 2019, at the beginning of the 5th year, what we did was to focus on identifying strong groups of leaders and to begin a targeted kind of training specifically for the leadership. Again, recognizing that culture starts at the top and radiates throughout. So in addition to our normal kind of training, which was for state credit, we also were focusing on leadership. And one of the first groups that we engaged in that way was in the mayor's office. There was a strong commitment from the administration that it would be so, and many of her direct reports came. So, some from deputy CAO, director level folks, as well as senior folks in her council. And there was actually a very strong interest in it. We scheduled it, I think it was for about standard 90 minutes, but it came close to 2 hours, and they still wanted to talk more. And so they were inviting us to come back in the spring to start again, which actually leads to the next point. During the time where we would have been planning to meet with a lot of departments and to roll this out more broadly, in addition to conducting the bulk of our training, which is what we would normally do, there's usually a big bump in the spring, and then in the late summer, early fall, when we would do our in-person training. Of course, we know that COVID-19 becoming more widespread at that time. And so as a result, the state and local governments put restrictions on gathering in person. And so we had to put a pause on doing the 1 hour training. We did send an initial request to the state to find out if we could do trainings online. And they told us that we wouldn't be able to do it for credit. And then following up again, we asked a second time later at the end of the summer, actually at the beginning of the fall, to find out if we could do trainings again. And they also said that, they still were not being able to give credit for us doing it online. And so based on feedback that we have gotten from you all, we have made some adjustments. So we'll go to the next slide. And so following up on the great suggestion from the board, from you, I believe that it was board member Liza who had suggested that we could put one of the training packets that we would normally do for our trainings online as an additional resource for the public, for public employees and for vendors. And so we did that. We created a generalized one so that certain departments wouldn't feel picked on if they showed up in the ethics scenario, especially if it was a sticky one. So we generalized it for city employees and for general vendors. And so we submitted that to be to put up as well. And thinking about that got us thinking about what other kinds of resources we could make available. Because again, coming out of the deep dive study, additional kinds of ancillary materials were ones that we would give out that would either be in trainings or ones that folks could take back to their office. And the idea of putting up a frequently asked questions list. And so there are questions that usually come up in the trainings that a lot of folks would probably want to know the answers to. And so we created that, and we also submitted that to be put up on the website as well. And so if you all, and we included it in the long form packet. So if you all have feedback on the questions themselves or other ones that you think we might want to include, we would be more than happy to update. So as we look forward to finishing out this year, we're actually on the other side of the last fifth year. But one thing that we have thought about doing, and also from feedback from the board, was to actually create an ethics leadership series. So while we can't meet with folks in person and give credit to their employees, we still think the focus on leadership is something that's really important. We've gotten strong feedback from a number of departments who are interested and with whom we've been in conversations about setting this up, and they are interested in doing it. So we're actually going to make it an online series of webinars and interactive webinars where we'll focus on the leadership teams of a number of different departments. It won't be given for credit, but there is a strong demand for it, and it'll be specifically focused on the heads of organizations. And as we think about how to create and to cultivate a culture of ethics, there's a different set of skills than just the kind of the regulations that we would normally teach in our session. So we see this as part of a great way of supporting culture and providing an important resource for leaders. So another thing that actually came out of the deep dive study was the idea that government employees, of course, are required to do a 1-year training online each year annually. And of course, they're subject to the code. But it turns out that vendors who do business with the city are also subject to the code, but there isn't a requirement for them to take the training annually. And so we thought that it would be a good idea, and what also came out of the study was to create a resource for vendors. A lot of folks who are doing business with the city for the first time may not know some of the regulations that folks often use and get in trouble. And so we thought it would be good to create a resource for them. So we've been in contact with the city's purchasing office about thinking about whether we can include some language or some information in every city contract that goes out. So when vendors know when they do new contracts or renew, they'll be aware of at least the high level points of what the code is or the things that they most likely will encounter. So we're having those conversations with the procurement office to see if that's something that might be possible, and if so, what might be involved. And so that'll be evolved. And so to conclude this part of it, the work that we were doing on the leadership series, even though we're outside of the contract period, we think that it's important and it's something that we want to deliver. And due to the constraints that have been put on by COVID-19, we thought that it was important to continue the momentum. And so this work will continue throughout this spring and into the first quarter of 2021. So I'll turn it back over to Tony.
Thanks, Eric. And So this is just a couple of just kind of summary, I think, accomplishments. Over the period, we've conducted 41, in-person training sessions, over 600 individual participants, with the vast majority of them fulfilling that 1-hour training requirement. Participants from across the city, 19 city departments, agencies, boards, and commissions. I think a very important accomplishment is the identification and the convening, really, of the 31 employees that constitute sort of the ethics liaison. And with them, even during this COVID period, we've been able to meet with them virtually. They continue to want to come together. We've conducted 6 in-person meetings, and we've already been able to identify and share best practices across the agencies. And we started the process of that long-term liaison training and learning curriculum. We continue to present monthly at the meetings. And I do want to say that over the course of all of our trainings, we've maintained, we're very proud of this, a very high participant session evaluation scores throughout. Through all of our sessions, we've collected virtually 99% of written evaluations from the participants, with 85% of the participants ranked the trainings as excellent, the highest rating, and 98% as good or excellent. So we feel comfortable about and happy about, I think, the trainings that we've delivered. Comments consistently include, we provided actual real life scenarios. It reinforced the concepts that they knew, but they needed that reinforcement. And they really enjoyed that personal interaction and the free flowing discussion between the attendees and the presenters and among each other. So that's it. That was just our quick 5-year summary. If anybody has any questions, now's the time. Thank you.
It looks like you're talking, Michael, but I think you may be muted.
Oh, you're muted. Yeah. Uh-oh, you're still muted.
Great work, Tony. It's good to see you too.
Oh, thank you. Hey.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice.
Sorry about that. So I'd like to give the board members an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have to our ethics trainers who are here.
I have a question.
Thanks.
Please.
So thank you for that presentation. That was helpful. I guess I have a couple questions on the, and I was glad to hear the follow-up on my questions from last round about whether the state would let you allow credit for your sort of ongoing Zoom meetings, and also getting some of those materials online. But I couldn't find them online. I had actually checked just before the meeting. Dane, is that possible to get them?
Eliza, I got them on late Thursday, and I just hadn't had a chance to put them up yet.
Okay. And I was wondering whether that resource for vendors you mentioned, which I think is a terrific idea, whether that could land on our website as well. So the sort of thing that, links could be distributed liberally. It's something.
I'm certain that I'm certain that it can, or some part of that. Actually, when we did a very specialized training for procurement, and they voiced that they needed that too. I don't know if some of it may be part of, they'll use it for their RP packets. You have mentioned the need for this, as well as in a liaison group, they mentioned the need for this. So everybody across the board seems to mention that having something for external vendors would be very helpful. So, we'll have a version of that certainly on the website. It may be slightly different than what we ultimately use for procurement, because that'll probably be added through the procurement and RFP process that they use, but it definitely seems like. So we certainly will post it.
And another point I saw on your the things learned from the deep dive, and I guess that was that's year three. Year three. Was
2018 at the very end.
was one of the recommendations was cards, posters, emails, reminders, and sort of non-training material, the things that people can have sort of in front of them as a reminder, sort of, you know, setting a culture, right?
Mhm.
Have you done any of those things? That sounds particularly helpful, and also something that can be distributed, but also just available through, you know, through links. And we've got a whole section on our webpage that is ethics training, and could, you know, sort of have different pieces. Right now it just talks about you guys, but it would
Yeah.
be nice if that could be an educational resource.
We'll certainly begin that for sure, because I agree with you 100%. And there's some resources that we can put together. One that we did was the frequently asked questions, but really people do want those handy dandy resources, checklists, reminders. So we'll look for and begin that process and look for some things that we know we can post that'll be helpful. Yeah, we can do that.
And if I might piggyback on what you were saying, Tony,
Yeah.
we actually, that was part of our spring initiative, was to begin rolling that out along with the leadership this past spring. And then with the great suggestion that you made about actually putting the packet online, that then made us think about it. And what you've said is a very natural extension of that. So yes, as Tony said, we'd be happy.
Great.
Board members?
I've got a question.
Yes, Ms. Kelly.
With regard to the state's response that they won't allow these classes to be on Zoom, it appears that we're going to be in this mode for a while, unfortunately. Is there something that we could do to change that? Are there requirements of submitting the courses for approval or something like that?
My thoughts on this. Yeah, it's going to last much longer than I think when they initially said very early on, oh no, they have an online slide version. So their default is ethics trainers just direct folks to our online presentation, and that will be sufficient. But again, fast forward, this is going to last much longer than I think they initially thought. What they said this last time that I talked with them, they said, well, some of the ethics trainers around the state, a few have begun in-person training, but very, very socially distanced, you know, in a room. We could do that, where we could have smaller groups. And when I talked with the state a few weeks ago, that's what they said. That's their only, that so far is what they're saying. I wish that they would allow us to do online. I think having to place ourselves in a room is just doesn't really make sense for a lot of people. I do think that the way that we conduct our trainings would be very easily adapted to an online version, because we now know how to interact through Zoom. We now know how to, to sort of get feedback from each other so that we can answer questions. So if you all appeal to the state as a board and, or if you all ask the question, I mean, they're very amenable, but they're very rules oriented. So they have the rule that they have something online and that's what they have. But I think that there's, other ways to provide that training. And I know specifically that the way that we train, it would be adaptable to an online kind of delivery. And I think it would be helpful. More helpful than that static online presentation that's provided, where people just go through slides.
Yeah, I'd second that suggestion, Holly. Mike, might we consider the board putting in a request to the state ethics board to see if they might make not just an online presentation like theirs, but instead an interactive Zoom meeting, allow that to give credit. I think that's a good idea. But and in any event, just as a separate follow-up, I might, I think you should consider offering them anyway, whether they're whether they're credited or not credited. It's an hour time, and it's a good conversation, and it's an important conversation to have. It has been of concern to me that that's just stopped for the duration. So I think that figure out a way to go forward with them one way or the other, with credit or without.
Mr. Caulfield, you mentioned being outside the contract period.
Oh,
I think I know what that means, but would you explain it to the board?
Oh, yes. So I think the technical end of the contract was October 15th, I believe. So we're just a few days beyond when the contract period was done. But just because of COVID and our commitment that we wanted to keep to the board and also to the city and its employees, we thought that it would be worth it to continue at least our plan for the leadership series, and then also the continuing to put new materials up online as we think about it.
Mhm.
So just to the board, we're going to need to deliberate about the future of this contract, and we're going to have to do it, I think, obviously in the near future. Start that. So, anything else for our trainers?
Is it an RFP situation, or what does that look like at this round?
It was a competitive bid selection, I think, wasn't it?
It surely was. Mhm.
Yeah, it was. It has to be done through a competitive RFP. The other option that the board has is to convert the position into an employee position and do it on that basis.
So we'll come back to that just to alert you. Let me make a couple comments to the especially to the new board members. When the Ethics Review Board was originally established, the assumption was that this body was going to hear ethics complaints that came in from anywhere in the city and adjudicate them. We found out a year or two into that process, and I may not have that right, that in fact, almost all the ethics complaints that come into this board are under the jurisdiction of the state ethics board. And that when they have jurisdiction, we have to pass that complaint onto them. The only thing that really leaves is a small body of things that's part of the city ethics code that's not part of the state ethics code. I'm going to ask Dane to say a little bit more about this at a future meeting. But the reason that I'm naming that particular thing is that when the board realized that it wasn't going to be playing that role, some conversation started about what would be the constructive role that this board could play, or an important constructive role. And there was a pretty strong consensus, I think, almost immediately, that we have a powerful ethics enforcement body, and that's the Office of Inspector General. But what about prevention, or what about education? We don't want to be limited to just catching people who have already violated the code. We want to support the education and the development of our employees, our contractors, and so forth. And so we literally spent 3 years looking at models, dealing with consultants, and then stood up this ethics training process that Tony and Eric have just gone through. I should also say that Dr. Joe Ricks, the past chair of of the Ethics Review Board, was really the leader of this, including the Ethics Awards. So I really want to thank our training team. I think we've come really a long way. I mean, having been in those early discussions about what we should do, I look and I see where we are, and I feel glad about it. And I think there's a lot to build on. So thank you for that, both of you.
Appreciate that.
If I might, Tony, and I think you were
Go
going
ahead.
to say it already, but of course, Dr. Cowan, you and former member Howard Rogers were part of kind of the folks who were focused on education on our side, and we just wanted to say, and Tony, please feel free to jump in too. It really has been a pleasure working with you all and seeing just the really good collaborative and the great direction that we've been getting from the board. Being on the front lines of it, it's great to train folks and to see them come back in year 2 or 3 after you've seen them a few times, and then they're answering the questions and saying, oh yeah, I remember that from last time, from last year. And so it really has been a great thing for us too. And Tony, please feel free to, of course.
And I agree. And I'm going to just make mention of one more thing about how important I really do think all of this is and how far this initiative really has come. We always start our presentation off with, you know we are from New Orleans. I worked in city government back in the Dutch Moriel administration.
Yeah.
People have impressions of how the city is and the departments around ethics. And I guess what I think has been just very enheartening is the real strong support and direction from this board, as well as the support that we've gotten from the past 2 administrations. I think really supporting all of the efforts, and I think that's really helped to kind of propel this initiative throughout. I really think that it's, you know, the whole idea, and I think with the 31 liaisons, I think that now this whole culture and this initiative, I think, is spread across the enterprise. I think a very strong foundation has been set. So thank you all very much. Okay. If Michael's talking, wait.
I think
You cut off. That's all right.
Let's move on to the discussion of the selection process for the next Inspector General. Dane, would you mind starting that off?
Sure. We obviously need to start the selection process. I've reached out to 3 search firms to get ballpark estimates on how much it would cost to hire a search firm to help us. The last time that we hired a search firm, we limited it to $15,000 so that it would be a professional services contract that could be done without an RFP, a formal RFP process. I didn't reach out to that firm. I mean, I'm happy to reach out to that firm again if you all want me to, but the firms that I did reach out to all were fairly consistent that it would be impossible for them to do anything under $15,000. So we'd have to go through the formal RFP process. One of them gave me an estimate of $50,000 to assist with that process. So it does seem like if we are going to hire a search firm that one of the bigger search firms in the country, we're going to have to go through the formal RFP process, which is going to take obviously more time than going with a $15,000 or less provider. But that's where I am now. If I think what we're going to need to do is to put on the next board meeting a vote on whether to, now I'm also a little concerned about with COVID and cutting budgets, whether we can get $50,000. We have enough money in our budget to pay for it, but it's just a concern that everybody in city government now obviously has about spending money. So, but ultimately, I think the board's going to have to make a decision at the next meeting whether it wants to do an RFP to find a provider, or whether it wants to find a provider for $15,000 or less. It's one of these classic situations. You got to tell me how much you want to spend, and then I'll go off and find some options for you.
I'd be very interested in board members' initial responses to this question of a search firm.
It would really help me to understand what an RFP would entail. Both, what we have to do on our end, where it goes, how long it takes. I'm just honestly, I just have no idea.
Right. I imagine it would take at least 2 to 3 months at the very least. It just takes time to get it all done through all of the various levels of the bureaucracy. I'm certainly happy to do it, and I'm certainly ready to get started doing it. But I just kind of need to know what you all want to spend.
So what does it entail? That we put in a request for bids? Is that the idea?
Well, yeah, we have to submit, we do it through purchasing and through the law department to get the package ready. We post it on the website, and then people have to submit proposals within X number of days. I don't know how long the process is open, whether it's 30 days or something along those lines. And then once we get those bids, then the board looks at all of the qualified bidders, and we would make a decision. We would pick one. I don't know the exact timeline, but I could get it for you for the next meeting.
Timeline.
Go ahead, Ms. Calderon.
I mean, so my impression is that, you know, the positive thing about it it'd be an opportunity to talk about exactly what it is that we want them to do. And that, which I think can be useful. I mean, it can be part of our process for the whole selection, is how are we choosing this firm? What are we going to require of them? Because I think one of the keys here in any process we adopt is that it's broad, that it's innovative as far as reaching out, not just to IG organizations, but, you know, judges, lawyers, auditors, and so broadly, both as far as fields, but also as far as genders, as far as race, as far as diversity, in a whole bunch, in all the ways that we can think of. And I think if going through the RFP process gives us an opportunity to set that, you sort of make all that, put that front end, all of that, front load all of that. So it doesn't have to be wasted time. In fact, could be very useful time.
Oh, that's true.
Dane, when we got Mr. Harper, was that done through a search firm? And which search firm? Is that the one you're saying was about 15,000?
It was done through a search firm, and I could look up the person's.
Wasn't it Slade, Dane?
It was, hold on. His name was. He was out of Atlanta, and I don't have his information here.
Okay, well, we can run that down and get it out.
Right. I mean, you know, at the time it appeared that he was very helpful and that he did a good job, and but you know, here we are.
One of the I suppose maybe the most frequent comment that I've heard about the Ethics Review Board over 10 years now has been that its most important function is to select the Inspector General. And I think it's really hard to argue against that. It's even hard to think of what would be in second place. It's so far behind that one. And so to me, hiring a consulting firm that's qualified and paying them what it costs through a competitive process is just, it would be, I mean, to me, that would just be something that we're required to do right now, or that we must do right now. Nobody's requiring this, but I think we just really need to do that and think hard, as Ms. Calderon was saying, about in the process, the job description, so to speak, and then how to recruit.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please, Dr. Sanders.
Yeah, so I guess the first question, I think, did Dane say that we do have, well, I guess the question is, how much money do we have in the budget that we could afford to spend on that? I wanted to make sure about that. And then the second question is, do we need to know how much we're going to spend in order to put out an RFP? Is that, yeah. So
yeah, we certainly have $50,000 in the budget to spend. At least we did before COVID, and assuming there's no cuts, that we do have that money. So we certainly do. And I've just looked up that it was Robert Slavin who was our consultant back in 2017. Robert Slavin was. So yeah, I mean, so I think that we have the money. It's just a matter of if you all want to spend the money on the RFP process, we certainly can. And
Dr. Sanders, you had a second part?
Yeah, it was, did we need to know how much we wanted to spend, whether it's 50 or 30 or whatever, But in order to put the RFP, does RFP have to have a max dollar amount on it?
Yeah, and I would think from talking to these firms that a $50,000 max dollar amount is going to be sufficient,
Would be sufficient?
would be sufficient.
So is it a request for qualifications or a proposal? Because
Proposals, they would have to submit formal proposals. And the bid packet, you know, it's got a lot of information in it. It's not just, this is what we'll do. It's got DBE compliance issues and so there's a lot, it's not a simple process.
yeah, so I guess I'm trying to get at, so because we're looking, if we put our request for proposals, part of what we're looking for also is who can do it, who's qualified, and who can give us the lowest price, correct?
Yeah, I guess that would be, price is another consideration. I mean, from the well-qualified bidders, yeah.
And so, but we're just saying possibly that we're internally, we're willing to spend up to 50, but that's not what we're advertising as such. And we're looking, if somebody says they can do it for 20 and they're qualified, we would possibly accept that also. Is that correct?
Yes, I don't know what the RFP says about the compensation, whether it sets exactly how much it's going to be or a range. I don't know the answer to that.
I think the whole idea of the RFP is to make a clear description of what we want to buy and then get the offers back from the people about what they would charge us to buy that.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, what's
Yes.
the going rate? Can you tell us the going rate, if they know?
Yeah, and
Going rate.
that's what from talking to the search firms that I've already talked to, it seemed like $50,000 was kind of around what these big firms, these are big national search firms, would charge for this kind of search.
Is there a firm in New Orleans? Any
No.
firms in New Orleans?
No, these are national firms. One of the firms, and again, I don't have my notes of which one it was, recently conducted a search for an executive director at City Park, and that cost $50,000.
Ooh.
So Dane, 50 is approximately the search cost. Are there any other costs that we need to be aware of?
I don't
mean,
think so. I mean, other than the cost of fly, if we're going to do live
Yeah.
interviews, flying in candidates.
Okay, so we just need to make sure there's enough money in the budget to cover those things, like if they have to fly in, hotel stays, meals, whatever, transportation.
Correct.
Okay, so do we have to find out what that budget availability is to ensure we don't go over, or you're pretty
Yeah, I'm confident
comfortable
we're
in
gonna have the
thinking
money.
that that would be covered?
Right, I'm confident we're going to have the money in our budget. And remember,
Okay.
keep in mind that this is, we're already almost in November, so we only have 2 more months of this budget year, and then the new budget year starts in January.
Let me go, Reverend Jefferson, let me go back to your question if I could, sir. Any firm that believes it has the qualifications to do this work is free to apply. No, nobody's being ruled out at this point. That would be for the ruling out and the ruling in. That will be for the board to do later. Are there any other thoughts or concerns about this selection of a search firm?
What's the time frame we're looking at? What you think?
Beg your pardon?
The time frame. What time frame we're looking at as it relates to trying to? I guess,
Time frame on the selection process?
Yes.
Did I get that right? Okay.
Or as a firm, getting a firm and everything. Yeah.
Oh, getting this. Yeah. Well, I would hope that we could make a decision about this next month.
Okay.
About the search firm, because time is getting away from us here.
About, I'm
Right,
sorry.
we won't be able to make a decision about a search firm next month, but we'll make the decision to put out the RFP.
RFP.
Well, yeah, sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah, that's what I meant. Start that process.
So how
'Cause
do
we
we decide exactly what goes into the RFP? Will that be part of the meeting next month?
Well, I think we should, Dana, I think it would be good if you looked at the job description for the Inspector General and circulated that to everybody. And how about if we have that as the basis for starting our discussion?
Yeah, and what I should do is put together the guts of a RFP, what we want the search firm to do.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be in the formal form,
But
we'll decide, but just kind of as a functional matter, what it is we want this.
that's even better.
Yeah,
That's even better. Yeah,
I'll
draft.
I'll have that as part of the agenda next meeting.
Yeah.
So we should, this is an important thing for us all to be aware of. Let's say we have $50,000 in our budget at this point. If that money is not expended by December 31st, then it goes back to the city, which is fine with me, except then that $50,000, if we go forward, would have to come out of next year's budget. So I'm just saying, I don't think we should press inappropriately, but I think we should move as expeditiously as we can.
I can tell you, Dana, I've actually been thinking about this some, as I've mentioned to you before. I can tell you a couple of things I'd like to see in an RFP. I'd like to hear from whatever firms. I'd like us basically to be asking them to aim for breadth, diversity, et cetera, and sort of being innovative in where they place advertisements, et cetera. But I'd also, the things I mentioned before, but I'd also like to, I'd like to know how they're planning to update us. I actually think that would be a good thing for them to be able to come in, as they're going through the process, which I assume will take a couple months as well, at least, that they actually appear before the board. I know we can work in subcommittees as well, but I don't see any reason that they shouldn't appear for updates in front of the full board and in front of the full public in that context, sort of keeping everybody up to date.
Right.
Why don't we,
can do it
I'm
all.
sorry, why don't we take the draft that Dane will supply us with and use that as an opportunity at the next meeting to fill in anything else that anyone would like, to bring up anything else that anyone would want for discussion, for deliberation among us. Does that address, Liza, your point?
Sure, I'm just putting some ideas out there, putting on some ideas out there since the topics, it's on the agenda for discussion this round.
Yeah.
So just sort of thinking ahead and trying to get it closer to being something we can vote on. Is sort of is why I thought to move forward with some ideas right now. But those are, that's the most of it. That really, I mean, the code sets forward what the qualifications for the IG are, right? They're both qualified and highly qualified candidates. That's done for us to some degree, but
That's right.
But we can for the proposals. I want to hear where they're planning to search. How they're planning to go about it, as well as how they're planning to keep us informed of their search and share the information with us.
Right. Anything else? Anything else on that? I think our next item has to do with a matter of the of restrictions on who can be hired. Ms. Calderon, would you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you. That is a proposal for an amendment of the ordinance to the city council. I think it came up briefly at our last meeting. I'm trying to pull up the actual document. I have right here. It's pretty simple. So this is the language from, I believe it's 11, code section 2-1120, 3D, if anybody's interested in subsections, which sets forth the restrictions on appointment. So basically there's that whole section in the code is about appointments for the IG and describes qualifications and a good deal of the process for us, although it doesn't go into the details about what the national search should look like. It does set forth the general process for our board appointing the next IG or any IG. But one of the things it does, and I think originally in an effort to, thank you, Dane, for pulling that up. One of the things it does, I think, in an effort to avoid influence of people in city governments, or to keep the job of the role of IG separate and apart from other city governments, is that or state government, is it sets a duration of time after which an employee of the state or city government cannot apply, does not qualify to be the inspector general, regardless of all of their other qualifications, high qualifications. The exception to that is for current employees of the New Orleans IG office. So as long as somebody's been employed there for 2 years, they can apply or qualify for the position of Inspector General. Less than 2 years, not. More than 2 years, yes, but only at that office. Any other employee in the city or state, they have to have been out of city employment or state employment for a total of 4 years before they apply for the job or before they qualify for the job. I'm not sure that's application versus appointment. But in any event, that seemed like a really long time and not really necessary. A little bit, I don't think there was any reason for it. And it basically, I think we want to try to broaden the pool, not narrow it. So that's why those numbers on there changed from 4 to 2. And then the second, you'll see it at section 2, subpart A, is an exemption that essentially mirrors the same exception in the preceding paragraph, where I just mentioned the exception for employees of the New Orleans IG office. So even though they're employees of the city government, they can apply and qualify as the Inspector General. But there's no similar exception in the law right now for employees of the state. So my proposal, and we talked about this briefly before, but is to add a mirroring exception. So if a person is a employee of an Inspector General's office outside of New Orleans, but in Louisiana, they can still apply to be the Inspector General of New Orleans, provided they've been at that office for 2 years or more. It really tracks the language of the same exception for the city. It's pretty simple that way. Last round, we lost a very good candidate because it was fully qualified otherwise, but not qualified. It was unqualified by the fact that this person was a employee at a different Louisiana Office of Inspector General, one of the parishes I recall. And it was a loss of diversity in that situation. It was a shame to see a well-qualified person not actually be qualified at all. So I propose that we change that, and we ask the City Council to change that.
So would you take questions from colleagues here?
Sure.
Ms. Calderon? Okay. Questions, board members?
Yes, I have one. Thanks first for doing the work here. I think and I may miss some things, but I think the issue with the 4 years, probably the rationale behind that was in terms of ensuring that the person who may occupy the position is still, 4 years is an election cycle, generally speaking, that they would then not be serving in that new capacity with old colleagues in their elected capacity. That could happen, but for the most part, there would be another election that would kind of serve as a refresher, so to speak. So they wouldn't necessarily. And does that? I'm trying to remember also my school board days, because the school board has a similar policy in terms of that issue also. So that's my only concern, is that with 2 years, if it's theoretically possible for a person still then to be in the new role and be able to have had collegial relationships with people who are still in their roles as other elected officials or whatever, which could pose some element of conflict.
Yeah, I had not understood that to be part of the rationale for it. I wasn't around when this particular law was or ordinance was put in place. I understood it was suggested by Mr. Sarasoli, who was the original Inspector General. This is my understanding. I could be corrected, or correct me if I'm wrong. Mike, you might know, but that basically it's a number that just creates a long time. I can't argue with you if that's the right number for election cycles, but I guess I kind of feel like it's sort of arbitrary in a way, insofar as some election cycles are shorter, some are longer, right? We're here for 7 years. It's not election, appointment cycles. I mean, there's a whole lot of places you can point to, but I think the idea is just to give a little bit of a breathing room, right? I think if somebody's going to have that sort of problematic relationship in the first place, It'll still be there 4 years later. It's there 4 years later. You see what I mean? 2 years, 4 years doesn't seem to be that
Yeah.
much difference to me. The integrity issue's got to be there in the first place. You know, the person's got to have integrity in the first place, which is of course one of the qualifications listed in the ordinance.
Mhm.
Does anyone have concerns about this proposal? That you might, please voice them if you do.
Did we get a copy of the proposal?
It's on the agenda. It's
Okay.
attached to the agenda.
Can we bring up that, Dane, can we bring up the proposal from the agenda? It's short.
Yes. Hold on, wait, hold on.
I went for simplicity in drafting over elegance, which is to say that I just mirrored the language of the exception that they already had, rather than trying to
Okay, now.
combine them together.
It's this right here.
So Liza, would you just go over not the whole thing, but yeah, just the part there, part
Sure,
that's highlighted?
sure. So if you look at that section 2, it really mirrors the preceding section 1, right? So where section 1 talks about elected officials or employees of New Orleans city government. Section 2 is former or current elected officials or employees of the state, so Louisiana or its political subdivisions other than New Orleans. And said they may not be appointed to the Inspector General within currently 4 years. I propose 2 years following that individual's period of service. And then the exception that basically I've added here mirrors the exception in the preceding subsection that says, regardless of that restriction, employees of these office of Inspector General who have served in the office for 2 or more years may be eligible immediately for appointment to the position of Inspector General. So likewise, notwithstanding the foregoing restrictions, employees of the office of Inspector General of the state or its political subdivisions who have served in any office for 2 or more years may be immediately eligible for appointment to the position of Inspector General. So again, my goal here is to open and broaden the pool. The last round, there was 1 female applicant and she was not qualified due to this provision and not having an opportunity to basically have that person apply and be considered.
So both in the case of the city number 1 and the state number 2, the change would be from 4 years to 2 years.
That's right. The change will be from 4 years to 2 years and adding an exception for current employees of Inspector General offices outside of New Orleans, but in Louisiana.
Yes, so it's all in parallel now.
Yeah.
Okay, Dane, you could pull that down if you would. And if there's no other discussion right now, the chair would entertain a motion to adopt the proposal that Ms. Calderon has made.
I'll move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Those in favor, then please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Okay,
Aye.
the ayes have it. Thank you. And thanks for your work on that, Ms. Calderon. Really appreciate it.
Gladly. Thank you.
Okay. Dane, help me out here. My agenda on my other screen here has disappeared.
Yes, we are, hold on, let me get to page 1. We are at discussion and vote of proposed amendment. That's what we just did. Oh, report of me, and then adjournment. My report is, as usual, first of all, we don't have any new complaints this month, which following up on what Mike said earlier is pretty much the norm. We only get 3 to 5 complaints a year, and this month we did not receive any. Number 2, I was going to report on the search process for the IG, and I've already discussed that. And last thing is the peer review for the ERB, which I am still having a very difficult time finding a volunteer willing to do this. You may recall at the last meeting, I had a motion, or I asked that someone move that we join COGL, which is the Council on Governmental Ethics Laws, which we joined, and we are now full-fledged members of COGL. And the current president of COGL was to work with me on finding a peer reviewer. They've never done a peer review of an ethics board. They've done, or they've heard of and been involved in peer reviews of IGs, but not of boards. So, and again, since we're looking for essentially volunteers to do this, it's hard to force him to do this. I had also reached out to the state board for possible help with this, and they have not volunteered to help. So if anybody's got any ideas on this, I'd appreciate it, but it's a long way of saying I still do not have possible peer reviewers for us.
I see, Mr. Harper, I see that you're still with us. Could you unmute your microphone? Thank you. Thanks very much. Could you tell us what expenses are involved in the triennial peer review by the Association of Inspectors General that the OIG office has?
The primary expense is for travel and hotel. The rest of the time, that is the actual time that they spend planning and then conducting the review, is part of what a couple of my staff members have been engaged in, and that's to volunteer their time to actually conduct a review. You may recall Erica Smith on my staff has been involved in several peer reviews of other entities.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thanks very much.
Right, and that's consistent. In my discussions with these people, I've told them that we can't give them an honorarium. We could discuss travel expenses, although with COVID and Zoom, I didn't anticipate any travel.
That's true. That's true.
So in any event, all I can do is continue to work on that. If anybody's got any ideas, please send them to me.
And let's talk offline about that.
Yep.
Dane, please.
Yes.
Okay, is there any board members, anything else? Okay, it was a productive meeting, I think. Thank you. And what about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Everybody stay safe.
I know.
Yeah, thank you.